Money was meant to liberate us, to give mankind the freedom to choose, to create, to build. Yet everywhere we look, freedom is a product sold back to us, measured in credit scores and interest rates. The richer a nation becomes, the more enslaved its people feel. We call it prosperity, but it behaves like a cage built from gold. If money creates debt, why does wealth create slavery? How did a tool of exchange turn into an invisible leash that binds both empires and individuals alike? History whispers an uncomfortable truth. The chains we wear are not forged by tyrants, but by agreements, signatures, and promises of comfort. To understand how humanity traded freedom for fortune, we must travel back to the moment when wealth first learned to rule, and when debt became the new master. In the smoky counting houses of Renaissance Florence, a new idea was born, one that would quietly rewrite the destiny of nations. Gold was heavy, slow, and finite, but trust could be multiplied. The Medici family, masters of both art and numbers, discovered that a signature could move more power than armies. Through the invention of double-entry bookkeeping and early credit systems, they replaced physical wealth with promises. This innovation ignited an age of prosperity and dependency. Kings borrowed to fund wars. Merchants borrowed to build fleets. Even the church borrowed to raise cathedrals that touched the heavens. Money no longer existed as metal. It became belief, bound by debt. As centuries passed, this invisible architecture spread through Europe like fire through parchment. The Bank of England institutionalized it. The Dutch perfected it. By the 18th century, entire empires ran on borrowed time and borrowed gold. For every lender, a borrower. For every empire, a creditor waiting in the shadows. The world learned a dangerous equation. The richer a society became, the deeper its dependence on unseen financiers. But behind the glitter of trade routes and the thunder of cannons, something else took shape. A quiet deal that would forever blur the line between freedom and servitude. It wasn't a conquest of land, but of faith. The faith that credit would never run out. And so began the illusion that prosperity was freedom, when in truth it was the beginning of a different kind of slavery. The genius of the system was its simplicity and its deceit. Debt was no longer a burden. It became the engine. The more a nation owed, the more money could be created. And the more money existed, the more power could be borrowed. It was an elegant trap disguised as progress. By the 19th century, the machine had gone global. The British Empire financed its navy not through conquest alone, but through bonds sold to investors across the world. Each cannon fired was paid for by a promise, interest-bearing paper that multiplied faster than any gold mine. Across the Atlantic, America studied the model carefully. Banks realized that if they controlled the flow of credit, they controlled the heartbeat of civilization itself. Then came the Federal Reserve in 1913, a moment disguised as reform, but crafted as consolidation. Central banks no longer merely guarded the vaults. They became architects of illusion. With every loan issued, new money was born, money that did not exist before. The public called it wealth, economists called it liquidity, but history will remember it as permissioned slavery. Because the deeper a nation sinks into credit, the less it can act freely. Each dollar borrowed is a vote surrendered. Governments wage wars not for ideals, but to sustain the credit systems that feed them. Ordinary citizens, too, chase wealth, believing it grants freedom, until they find themselves working lifetimes to repay numbers that were never real to begin with. The system rewards growth, even when that growth devours the very people it was meant to serve. The illusion of prosperity blinds the debtor while enriching the issuer. And so, generation after generation, humanity builds higher towers of credit, each layer more unstable than the last. It wasn't chaos, it was design. Those who lend shape the destinies of those who borrow, The masters of money no longer wear crowns or command armies. They own the contracts, the laws, the time of billions. And as history turns its silent wheel, the same question echoes across every age. When wealth depends on debt, is anyone truly free? The pattern has never changed. Only the faces of those who play it. Every empire that rose on the back of borrowed gold eventually drowned in the weight of its own promises. The Roman Empire debased its currency until silver turned worthless and faith collapsed. The Spanish crown drained the mines of the New World, only to fall into bankruptcy under the cost of endless wars. The British Empire expanded across oceans, yet its power was mortgaged to the very bankers who funded it. Debt feeds expansion, but expansion breeds collapse. Wealth becomes so vast, so concentrated, that it begins to rot from within. What began as progress turns to servitude, not through chains of iron, but through contracts, taxes, and interest payments stretching across generations. By the 20th century, the same story had been rewritten in modern ink. Nations traded the gold standard for promises of credit. Citizens traded savings for speculation, and the world entered an era where illusion replaced value. The global financial crisis of 2008 was not a failure of systems. It was their perfection. The system did exactly what it was built to do: protect capital at the cost of human freedom. And yet, we call it stability. We measure our success in digits and graphs, unaware that the foundation beneath it all is still the same. Faith in something that was never real. History offers no comfort, only clarity. Empires do not fall because of enemies. They fall because their debts devour them from within. From Caesar to Wall Street, from gold coins to algorithms, the pattern endures. Because when money becomes belief, and belief becomes law, freedom becomes the price we pay to keep the illusion alive. Today, the illusion has only grown more sophisticated. We no longer borrow gold, we borrow time, attention, and data. The currency of the digital age is not minted in metal. It's extracted from behavior. Algorithms, not bankers, now calculate. Creditworthiness and invisible systems decide who may rise and who must serve. Governments promise growth as if it were a moral duty. Citizens chase comfort as if it were liberation. But the core equation has not changed. Freedom depends on debt, and debt depends on obedience. The modern worker is chained not to a factory floor but to a subscription, a mortgage, a lifetime of digital contracts disguised as choice. Just as monarchs once knelt before bankers, nations now kneel before markets. When economies falter, the response is always the same. Print more promises, inflate belief, extend the leash. We call it stimulus. We call it rescue. But in truth, it is simply the maintenance of dependence. History doesn't repeat. It refines its control. The names change. Rome becomes Wall Street, gold becomes data, contracts become code, but the purpose remains constant. To keep the many chasing what the few already own. And until someone questions the price of that pursuit, wealth will continue to buy obedience, not freedom. Perhaps this was the destiny of money all along. Not to free us, but to test what we value most. We traded the uncertainty of survival for the certainty of control, and in doing so, forgot that true freedom cannot be borrowed. Every empire, every generation, repeats the same silent prayer. Just one more loan, one more cycle, one more chance to make it right. But history has never forgiven that illusion, because in the end, it is not power that corrupts money. It is money that corrupts freedom. And until humanity learns that wealth without wisdom is just a gentler form of slavery, we will keep rebuilding the same golden cage, believing it was built for our protection.